For 30 years, I poured everything I had into my son. Every hard-earned penny, every dream I dared to dream for him, every sleepless night spent worrying about his future. I sacrificed my youth, my health, and my heart. And yet when he finally looked me in the eye, his voice was sharper than any knife. "You're nothing to us." The words hit harder than a fist. He didn't just speak them, he spat them at me, stripping away 3 decades of devotion as if they had never existed. And then with the cold cruelty of a stranger, he told me to get out. The whispers came quickly. "He's broken." That's what people said about me. A father discarded like old furniture. But I was not broken. In court under the sterile lights with my son sneering from across the room, I let silence hang. Then slowly I reached into my coat, pulled out a yellow document, and placed it in the judge's hands. My heart thundered, but my smile never wavered. The judge's eyes scanned the paper, his expression hardening. And then it happened. My son's face drained of color, his jaw tightened. He stood shouting, his voice cracking, as the truth of that document shattered his confidence. For the first time in years, I felt it. Justice. Not vengeance, but justice, rising steady and unshakable inside me. The keys hit the glass table with a metallic clang, loud and final like a gunshot. Liam paced the living room, his polished shoes rapping sharply against the hardwood floor. "You think we owe you something?" he hissed. "You're nothing to us." I stood frozen in the doorway, my hand gripping the handle of a small suitcase. His words carved through me like steel. 30 years of sacrifice, reduced to ashes in a single breath. On the sofa, Olivia lounged elegantly, her arms crossed, a faint smirk twisting her lips. She leaned against the white leather as though she owned the world. "David, don't drag this out." She purred, her voice smooth as silk but cold as the marble countertop behind her. "It's time for you to go." The house glittered with wealth, crystal chandelier, floor-to-ceiling windows, imported rug now marred by spilled wine. My house, my legacy. The home I had signed over to Liam 5 years ago, foolishly believing it was an act of love. "Foolish boy," I whispered, trembling despite myself. "I gave you everything." He stopped pacing, turned and jabbed a finger at the door. The light caught on his wedding ring, cold and gleaming. "And I'm done carrying you. Get out." Olivia's hand twitched, betraying a flicker of unease, but her eyes never softened. She wanted me gone. Both of them did. I looked at my son, trying to see even a shadow of the boy who once clung to me, the night his mother died, sobbing into my chest. But that boy was gone. Before me stood a stranger, his face twisted with contempt. My fingers brushed against my coat pocket, feeling the fragile envelope tucked inside. Not yet. Not here. The time wasn't right. In my suitcase, I carried only a few shirts, a faded photograph of my late wife Mary, and that envelope. Its weight steadied me, reminding me that I still had one final card to play. "David," Olivia said, stepping closer, her perfume sharp, suffocating. "Don't make a scene. It's undignified." "Sucker." I held her gaze, my jaw tightening. "You'll regret this." I wasn't even sure if I meant it as a warning or a desperate plea. Liam's laugh was cruel, a bark echoing off the walls. "Regret you're the one who'll be sorry, old man." I turned toward the heavy oak door, the brass fittings glinting under the chandelier's light. Behind me, Olivia's voice rang out one last time, dripping with mockery. "Take care, David." I pulled the door open. A gust of cold rain hit my face, soaking through my thin coat, chilling me to the bone. For a moment, I stood in the threshold between the world I had built and the emptiness beyond. "Liam," I said quietly, my voice low but steady, "you're wrong about me." And then I stepped into the storm. The door slammed behind me, the echo chasing me down the steps and into the wet night. Rain lashed against my face, sharp and cold, blurring the glow of the street lamp at the corner. I stood there on the curb with nothing but a scuffed suitcase in my hand, no car, no plan, no home left to turn to. I could already hear the whispers, "Poor David broken," thrown out like garbage by his own blood. But as the rain soaked through my thin coat and stung my skin, something deeper stirred inside me. It wasn't pain, not yet. It was smaller, quieter, an ember, but alive, flickering in the dark, refusing to die. I took a step forward, then another, the suitcase dragging at my arm heavier than it had ever been, and I let the night swallow me whole. The mattress sagged beneath me, its rusty springs groaning with every shift of my weight. A single bare bulb hummed above, casting a weak yellow glow across cracked walls that smelled faintly of mildew. My new apartment in Lent. Paper-thin walls carried muffled shouts and laughter from neighbors I would never meet. It was a far cry from West Hills, from the house, with the polished floors and soaring ceilings. Once I had pictured something else for my life: travel laughter, evenings with Mary's soft voice filling the kitchen. Now I had this: a chipped coffee mug from a thrift store, a wobbly table with one leg shorter than the rest, and a silence so heavy it pressed into my skull. I unzipped the suitcase, slow and deliberate. A few shirts, a worn sweater, and then at the bottom the photo. Mary's smile froze me in place. Her hair caught the sunlight, her arm curled around Liam, who couldn't have been older than 6. He grinned wide, his teeth too big for his little mouth, his face sticky with popsicle juice. I remembered carrying him on my shoulders that summer, his laughter echoing through the park as he pointed at airplanes overhead, asking which one we'd fly on together one day. After Mary died in '95, that promise to give him the world became my only reason to breathe. So I worked, double shifts, weekends. I gave up vacations, Europe, every dream of my own. I traded them all for his summer camps, his braces, his college tuition. I remembered the stack of bills spread across the kitchen table, the way I'd flipped them face down before he got home. "We're fine, kid," I'd say with a smile that wasn't real. The faucet dripped steady and cruel. My hands shook as I set the photo down. A question gnawed at me sharper than hunger. Did I love him too much? Is that what broke him? Because I had given him everything. The house, my savings, my pride, even my name scrawled on the deed I signed over. "And for what you're nothing to us." His voice still rattled in my skull, as sharp as the moment he said it. I dug deeper into the suitcase and felt at the envelope. Yellowed edges frayed my handwriting, fading. I'd carried it like a secret for years, hidden even from myself. My fingers lingered on the seal. Not yet, I thought, but I knew it mattered. More than I could understand tonight. I leaned back, letting memories wash over me. Liam at 16, begging me to visit his campus. "You'll come, right, Dad?" I'd nodded, knowing I couldn't afford the train ticket. "Sure, son," I'd lied. Another broken promise made to protect him from disappointment. Now I wondered what he would say if I asked him the one question I couldn't bury. "Why, Liam, what didn't I give you?" The phone buzzed on the wobbly table. His name lit up the cracked screen. My thumb hovered, but I pressed decline. I didn't want his voice in my ear. Didn't want Olivia's smooth poison telling me to be reasonable. The silence after I shut the phone off was deafening. I rose, pacing the narrow room floorboards, groaning underfoot. My eyes caught the old mug Mary used to drink from every morning, chipped from when Liam dropped it as a toddler. I had kept it all these years. Like her, it was gone now, boxed away with everything else I'd lost. The weeks since that night blurred together. I'd moved into this studio above a nail salon, anonymous and cheap, as if the world had erased me. I unpacked, slowly, avoiding mirrors, avoiding the reflection of the man I had become. But tonight something shifted. I placed the envelope on the table. Its weight felt heavier than the suitcase. More than paper, it was a piece of me, a truth I had almost forgotten. I sank onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling's water stains. Liam thought he had won, that throwing me out would end me, that I'd fade into nothing. But as I listened to the rain pounding against the window, I felt it again, that ember. Small, fragile, but burning. He was wrong. Anger, raw and sharp, twisted inside my chest like barbed wire. It was foreign and yet achingly familiar, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. It pressed against my ribs, restless, demanding release, growing wild like weeds forcing their way through cracked pavement. I didn't know what I was capable of doing next, but one truth was clear: I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The library door slammed behind me, louder than I intended, the sound echoing through me before dissolving into the soft hum of Portland's public library. The smell of dust, leather bindings, and old paper surrounded me as I moved past rows of tall bookshelves. My anger clawed for an outlet, something to anchor itself to. 2 weeks since Liam's betrayal, and still the wound was open, bleeding. The pain hadn't dulled, but something else was stirring awake. A fire. A need to fight back. I dropped heavily into a chair at one of the long oak tables, my palms flat against the wood. Stacks of legal books loomed over me like towers, property law contracts, inheritance. The words on their spines looked like a foreign language, but one I was determined to learn. I pulled a notebook close, uncapped my pen, and began to scratch words onto the page. Every note, every underline felt like a rebellion, small acts of defiance against the man who had looked me in the eye and told me I was nothing. "You look like you're at war with the world," a voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up. A woman stood across from me, her coat still damp from the drizzle outside, glasses perched low on her nose. She was somewhere in her 50s with silver threading through her hair and eyes that were sharp but not unkind. She looked like someone who had seen enough of life to understand without asking. "Maybe I am," I said, forcing a half smile. She slid into the chair opposite me, placing a heavy book on the table with a soft thud. "Ellen Marshall," she said. "I'm a lawyer, and you look like a man who could use one." I hesitated, my throat tightening. "David Clark. I'm figuring things out." Her silver earring caught the library light as she leaned forward. "Figuring things out usually means you're in trouble. Want to tell me about it?" Something inside me cracked. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. My son, he kicked me out, took the house I gave him, told me I was nothing. Saying it out loud was like tearing open an old wound. It burned, but in that burn, there was also release. Ellen's jaw tightened, her gaze steady. "Sons can be ungrateful. But you," her voice softened, "you're stronger than you realize." She pushed a thick book toward me. "Fundamentals of Property Law. Start here. It's not as dry as it looks." For an hour we talked at that table, the muted rustle of pages and hushed whispers of the library fading into the background. She shared fragments of her own scars, a bitter divorce, a daughter she hadn't spoken to in years. "I know what it's like to lose family," she said quietly. "But losing them doesn't mean you have to lose yourself." Her words cut deep, sharper than any legal text in front of me. I thought of the envelope tucked away in my apartment drawer, yellowed, frayed at the edges. More than paper. A key, a reminder, a weapon. "How do I fight this?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed, steel flashing beneath the kindness. "You find their weaknesses? People like your son, they're careless, arrogant. That's where they slip. That's where you strike." Later we carried our conversation to a small cafe down the street. Rain streaked the windows, the air heavy with the smell of roasted coffee beans. My phone buzzed on the table. Liam, his name flashing, taunting. My thumb hovered, but I pressed decline. I didn't want to hear his voice. Not his apologies, if he even had any to offer. Not his excuses. Ellen noticed but didn't press. Instead, she drew lines on a napkin, mapping out strategies. Fraud claims. Contract loopholes. "You'll need evidence," she said firmly. "Something they can't argue away." I nodded, my fist clenched beneath the table. Liam thought he had buried me. Olivia thought she had broken me. They were both wrong. Back in my apartment, I sat at the rickety table beneath a flickering bulb. The envelope lay before me, heavier than any suitcase I had carried. My hands trembled, but I didn't open it. Not yet. It wasn't time. But for the first time in weeks, I felt it, a pulse beneath my ribs, steady and alive. Hope. Not the fragile kind that disappears with the dawn, but the kind that builds brick by brick into something unshakable. I sat in the library again the next morning, my pen clenched like a weapon, the flame inside me burning hotter than ever. Ellen slid a stack of papers across the table, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. She tapped a news article about Liam's real estate firm and said simply, "This is where we begin." The headline screamed louder the more I stared at it. Client complaints, cracks in his empire. The kind of small fractures that, if pressed, could shatter the illusion Liam had built around himself. Weeks of digging had led us here. Late nights tucked away in Portland's hushed libraries, afternoons in dim cafes smelling of espresso and rain. I could still smell the paper dust clinging to the air, still hear the low hum of vending machines as I traced my finger across documents that painted a portrait of arrogance dressed as success. Liam's life unfolded across public records and polished social media feeds, revealing a man drunk on power, too blinded by his own ego to see the cliff ahead. Ellen leaned closer, her glasses slipping down her nose, pointing at Olivia's latest post, a gala photo where her smile was so perfect, It looked carved, her eyes betraying the strain beneath. She lives for control, Ellen whispered. That's her weakness. I wrote it down, every word, my pen pressing so hard it nearly tore the page. Liam's firm was already under scrutiny, his deals smelling of rot. If the right hands pushed hard enough, the facade would crumble. Olivia, meanwhile, was porcelain, polished, untouchable until a single crack appeared. I imagined her standing in a boardroom, chin raised, voice sharp, but her fingers trembling if whispers of scandal ever reached her ears. Ellen slid her laptop toward me, her hand shaking just slightly. Look, a forum post, a disgruntled client, an accusation of inflated property values, the kind of carelessness Liam was infamous for. Her voice was steady, but the rhythm of her drumming fingers betrayed her excitement. I leaned back, my chair creaking, a grim smile tugging at me. He's careless, I muttered. Always was. My thoughts flicked to the envelope waiting in my drawer at home. Its edges worn its weight, more promise than threat. Not yet. Soon. Ellen's voice softened, unexpected. You remind me of myself. She twisted her coffee cup between her hands, the strength in her shoulders faltering. After my divorce, he took everything, my home, my pride. I built it back piece by piece, but the cost, her throat tightened. My daughter. She doesn't call anymore. For a moment, the lawyer's armor cracked, and I saw the wounded woman underneath. I'm sorry, I said, my chest tightening. I know what it's like to lose family. She waved the apology away, but her eyes held mine with a quiet fire. That's why we're doing this, David. Not just for you, for everyone they've left broken. Later, the rain-slicked streets of Portland mirrored neon and headlights as we slipped into another cafe. Through the glass, I saw her, Olivia. Perfect coat, flawless stride. She didn't see me, but the sight of her so close, so untouchable, lit a fire under my ribs. I ducked lower, heart-hammering rage and resolve tangling in my veins. Back in the library, the pieces came together like a net tightening. Marcus Reed, a client swindled, a date, a deal far too inflated. Each fact a thread. Ellen sketched a timeline across paper, her pen scratching like a general's war map. We're close, she murmured, but we must be surgical. I pictured Liam smug in his glass office, Olivia adjusting her pearls, both convinced I'd been erased. My hand curled into a fist around the paper. Not erased. Waiting, watching, hunting. For the first time, I wasn't prey. At home, I spread the notes under the dim bulb shadows twitching across the wall. Liam's arrogance, Olivia's fragile vanity. They were vulnerabilities, now no longer strengths. My finger lingered on Marcus Reed's name. The time had come. The public computer's glow lit my face as I typed. Each keystroke felt like cocking a trigger. The words were sharp, careful concerns about fraudulent practices at Clark Realty, a hint at Marcus Reed's complaint, a breadcrumb trail that could not be ignored. My pulse roared in my ears. Too far, he was still my son. But then his voice returned, cold and merciless. You're nothing to us. The memory of that night, the rain, the betrayal. The door slamming burned away my hesitation. I hit send. The screen blinked, the message vanishing into the void, racing toward Liam's world like a stone hurled through glass. Around me, the library carried on, clicking keyboards, the muffled cough of a stranger, the smell of old paper. I wiped my forehead, the sweat icy on my skin. Anonymous email. Public terminal. No trail. For the first time in weeks, I felt it, a jolt of power, raw and dangerous. The war had begun. Still, my hands trembled as I logged out of the library terminal, the screen fading to black, as if it had swallowed the last trace of what I'd done. I glanced over my shoulder, pulse hammering, every stranger in that quiet room, suddenly suspect every cough a threat. The weight of my choice pressed down on me, terrifying, yes, but in the same breath, it carried a thrill I hadn't felt in years. For once, I wasn't powerless. For once, I'd struck first. By the time I slid into the booth across from Ellen at a small cafe, the September drizzle had soaked her coat. She leaned in, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. It's done. I knotted, my throat tight. Sent this morning. Her eyes gleamed, a sharp satisfaction flickering there. She stirred her coffee slowly, deliberately, as though grounding herself. Good, she whispered, lips curving in something between a smile and a warning. That was a clean hit. But don't be fooled, David, they'll push back. Hard. Be ready. Her words lingered like smoke between us, but beneath them I caught a flash of pride in her smile. For a moment I let myself imagine Liam, my son, trapped in the chaos I'd unleashed. I pictured him in his polished office tie, hanging loose, shouting at his assistant as his phone buzzed with relentless calls. Angry clients demanding answers, colleagues whispering in the hallways, the empire he thought untouchable showing its first cracks. And then Olivia. She'd be worse. I could almost hear her voice, sharp as broken glass, hissing across the room. "You've ruined us, Liam." I imagined her pacing heels striking against marble floors like a ticking clock, her icy composure splintering, her hands trembling as she tried to hold it all together. He'd slam his fist on the desk, swearing he could fix it, but this time he couldn't. Not against what was already moving. "You're quiet," Ellen said gently, breaking into my thoughts. Her spoon clinked against the mug. Second thoughts I swallowed, forcing a shaky breath. No, they deserve this. But even as I said it, my voice wavered. Because the truth burned deeper, I had raised him. I had loved him. And now I was the one tearing his world apart. The thought twisted like barbed wire in my gut, yet I pushed it aside. He had made his choice long ago. I was simply answering it. Days later, the proof arrived like a thunderclap. A small article buried in the corner of a news site, Clark Realty faces inquiry over alleged fraud. My heart jolted. It had worked. The net was tightening. Liam's name wasn't printed yet, but I could feel it looming. I leaned back in my chair at home, the old wood creaking under my weight, and let myself smile. For the first time in months, the cracked mug on my table didn't look so lonely. That night, Ellen's voice buzzed through the phone, alive with excitement. "You saw the article?" she asked, almost breathless. "They're scrambling, David. Scrambling. But keep your head down. People like them, people with power, they don't lose quietly." "I know," I murmured, tracing the edge of the phone with my thumb. My mind flickered to the envelope in my drawer, its presence a silent insurance policy, a safety net if everything went wrong. Maybe I'd need it. Maybe not. For now, this was enough. I had thrown the first stone, and the sound of shattering glass was intoxicating. But as the days bled into nights, the victory soured. Each new article brought more details, clients pulling out, regulators circling, whispers turning into storms. The glow of triumph dimmed, replaced by a cold unease I couldn't shake. Outside, rain hammered my apartment window, and with every update, my chest tightened. They would fight back. I knew it. Liam and Olivia wouldn't crumble like sandcastles in the tide. They would claw, bite, and tear until they found the hand that struck them. I checked my locks again and again, the bolt freezing against my fingers. The apartment felt smaller now, the shadows longer. Then came Ellen's call, summoning me to a park far from curious eyes. The air smelled of wet leaves, heavy and raw. Her scarf fluttered in the wind as she leaned close. "Someone's asking questions," she whispered. "A man at the cafe yesterday watching me. Following, maybe. Private detective." Her voice stayed steady, but her hands clutched her bag too tightly. My stomach sank. "Because of the letter, likely," she said, scanning the path around us. The park was nearly empty, only a lone jogger in the distance. "They're scared, David. That's good, but it makes them dangerous." I could see it clearly. Liam, in his sleek office jaw, clenched fury in his eyes as he hired someone to hunt me down. Olivia Calder still issuing orders like a general at Warfind. Who did this? Now. Or we're finished. Her nails tapping against glass, her smile brittle, her patience razor thin. Their perfect life was unraveling thread by thread. And I had pulled the first one. But as Ellen and I walked the muddy path, our shoes squishing with each step, her voice softened, almost tender. And for the first time, I wondered what would be left of me when their world finally collapsed. "I've been here before, you know." My ex once hired a man to shadow me during the divorce, a private investigator who promised to unearth my darkest secrets. He found nothing, but the damage was done. I spent months with my nerves frayed, staring at shadows, imagining footsteps behind me. Sleepless nights waiting for the next phone call that never came. Ellen's voice cut through my thoughts, quiet but steady, her breath visible in the chill night air. "We'll outsmart them. We have to." I nodded, but deep down I knew fear was nodding with me. What if they traced the letter back to me? What if they found Ellen, dragged her into the storm I'd started? The envelope hidden in my drawer flashed in my mind, a thin line of defense, my so-called insurance policy. But I knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. That night's sleep betrayed me again. Memories slipped into my mind like unwelcome intruders. Liam at 15, his fingers caught red-handed in my wallet. "I didn't do it, Dad," he'd said, eyes wide, lying without a flicker of shame. I forgave him then. I told myself he would grow out of it. But that boy had grown into a man who cast me out of my own home. The truth hit hard, it hardened me, but it also left a wound that would never fully heal. When Ellen and I met again, it was in a crowded diner where the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation became our shield. She slid a napkin across the table, her handwriting sharp, urgent, Victor Clean, private investigator. Her voice was low, almost lost under the hiss of the espresso machine. "He's good, but he's sloppy. Ask the librarian about me." My throat tightened. I hadn't touched my coffee. "What do we do?" Her hand brushed mine, steady, deliberate. "Stay invisible. No more public computers. Keep your phone off unless you're using it. We're smarter than them, David. Remember that." I wanted to believe her, but back in my apartment, the walls felt closer, the silence louder. I stuffed my notes into a shoebox, my hands trembling, as though even the paper could betray me. The street outside was too still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. I thought of Liam's smooth lies, of Olivia's cutting smile. They weren't just circling, they were hunting, and I was the prey. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. The sound froze me in place. I stared at the screen until it stopped, leaving behind a silence even worse than the ringing. A creak outside my window followed sharp against the rain. My fists clenched, my heart hammering. They were close. Too close. The next morning I stood in the park, my umbrella straining against the November wind. I hadn't slept. Every shadow from last night still lived in my head, every sound replaying. But this morning I wasn't hiding, I was bracing. The game had begun, and I wasn't backing down. Ellen was already there, perched on a peeling bench, her scarf hanging loose, a notebook open on her lap. "We need to be precise," she murmured, her pen scratching as she sketched a timeline. "One wrong move and they'll pounce." The air smelled of wet leaves and faint wood smoke. Somewhere a dog barked, its echo swallowed by drizzle. I pulled my coat tighter, clutching my own battered journal. "The document," I said, finally, my voice steady but low. "It's our edge." Ellen's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "The original deed." "You're sure it holds up?" I nodded once. There had been a mistake when I signed the house over. On paper, legally, it was still mine. I didn't explain more. Not yet. The yellowed contract locked in my apartment was my ace, the one card that could unravel Liam's empire. But we had to play it right. Ellen leaned closer, her breath curling white in the air. "Then we file a claim quietly. But we need a distraction, something to keep them stumbling while we move. Anonymous tips, complaints to regulators, whispers to stir the pot. We hit them where they're weakest. Liam's ego, Olivia's image." Her words were sharp, but her hand trembled as she tapped her pen against the page. I scribbled notes, my fingers steady this time. I wasn't the broken man they had thrown out. I was something else now, calm, calculating, a strategist laying the groundwork for a trap. But a sliver of doubt twisted inside me. "What if this changes me, Ellen? What if I lose myself in all this?" She smirked, closing her notebook with a snap. "If we mess this up, I'll buy you coffee at the worst diner in Portland." Deal. Her humor cracked the tension, and against all odds I laughed. The sound startled me, foreign after weeks of silence and fear. She wasn't just my ally anymore. She was my anchor, a friend who reminded me I was still human, still capable of more than bitterness and revenge. Together under the gray November sky, we mapped it out, a letter to the city about Liam's dealings, vague but cutting. An anonymous burner account feeding regulators the trail. And hidden in a drawer, a legal draft that could take back the house they had stolen. The first pieces of our war were falling into place. Each step I took felt like laying another brick in the fortress I was building around myself. Every note, every plan, every whispered meeting with Ellen, it was more than strategy. It was survival. But Liam's grin still haunted me. That smug, careless curl of his lips, the look that said he believed himself untouchable. And Olivia, her eyes like ice, sharp enough to cut. They thought they'd buried me, written me off as weak, broken, discarded. That was their mistake. And now I was teaching them what it meant to underestimate a man who had nothing left to lose. A jogger passed by, hood-up shoes slapping the wet pavement of the park. My chest tightened, my heart thudding like a drum. For an instant, I was sure Liam had sent someone, his detective lurking, just steps away. "You're jumpy," Ellen murmured, her voice steady, almost too steady. Her eyes followed the man as he jogged past. "He's just a runner. Stay focused." But her hand betrayed her. It tightened around her leather bag knuckles, pale as though she too felt the shadow creeping closer. I flipped open my journal, its pages worn soft by my restless hands. Dates, names, notes scrawled in cramped handwriting. Weaknesses I had cataloged, a ledger of the cracks in Liam's empire. His fraudulent dealings, Olivia's desperate need to preserve her image. They were exposed now, whether they knew it or not. "We're close," I said, my voice hardening with a conviction that felt new in my chest. "I can feel it." Ellen nodded, rising from the bench, her scarf tugged tight against the December wind. "We are. But remember, David, this isn't war, it's chess. One move at a time." I folded my notes, the sound crisp in the cold air, and slipped them into my pocket. This wasn't just a plan anymore. It was power raw, heavy, intoxicating. Back in my apartment, the radiator hissed and groaned, throwing out more noise than heat. I slid the folded pages into the drawer beside the deed, my ace, the proof that could topple everything Liam had built. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel cornered. The game had begun, and I was no longer a pawn. The next morning, the headline burned across the news site: "Clark Realty fined for shady practices." My chest constricted, not with dread, but with a sharp, bitter joy. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking, the dim lamp behind me throwing jagged shadows across the walls. Liam, my son, the man I raised, was unraveling. And I had pulled the thread. The article spelled it out in merciless detail. Fines, clients fleeing, regulators circling like vultures. His name wasn't in the headline, but it didn't have to be. In the quiet corridors of power, whispers would already be spreading. Phones would go silent. Colleagues would look the other way. I pictured him in his gleaming office tie, loosened temper breaking. Papers scattered across the floor as deals slipped away one by one. And Olivia, she would be even harsher, her words slicing deeper than any regulator's report. "You're dragging us down, Liam. Fix this or I'm gone." He'd plead, his pride fracturing, but her heels would click against the marble floor as she turned her back on him. At a cafe, thick with the smell of cinnamon and wet coats, Ellen slid into the booth across from me. Her hair was damp from the rain, her cheeks flushed. "You saw it?" she asked softly. I nodded, my coffee untouched, my stomach tight. "It's working," but guilt twisted in me like a knife. For a moment I saw Liam, not as the man he had become, but as the boy he once was, 8 years old, arms looped around my neck after a school play, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Dad." And now here I was, dismantling him piece by piece. "He was my son," I muttered, my throat thick. Ellen's gaze softened, but her voice stayed firm. "He is your son, but he chose this fight. Remember that." Her calm steadied me, though doubt still clawed at the edges of my resolve. My phone buzzed, Liam's name glowing on the screen. My finger hovered, trembling, then pressed decline. The screen went black. The silence after was heavier than the call itself. "He knows," I whispered. "He knows it's me." Ellen leaned forward, her voice low, urgent. "You hit hard. But he's not done, David. People like him, they fight dirty when they're cornered." Her warning sent a chill through me, but behind it I caught something else. A flicker of excitement, a fire that matched my own. That night I checked the locks twice, the deadbolt cold under my fingers. The radiator rattled the apartment, thick with the smell of stale coffee. I pulled up the article again, its glow washing over me in the dark. More details had emerged: lawsuits, partners withdrawing, cracks spreading fast through Liam's empire. I smiled, but it faded quickly. He wasn't just losing money, he was losing himself. And I had done it. Another call came, Liam's name flashing. I shut the phone off completely, the silence swallowing the room. My chest ached, torn between grim triumph and a father's grief. But grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. The next move was Olivia's. She thought me weak, a man to discard. She was about to learn otherwise. At the library, the glow of old computers painted our faces pale. Elin typed, her fingers quick, precise. Together we drafted a letter, anonymous, sharp, undeniable, laying bare Olivia's quiet embezzlement. Small amounts tucked away in marketing budgets funneled to her personal accounts. Not much, but enough. Enough to fracture her facade of perfection. I sat beside her, my fingers drumming the table, my pulse steady now. We weren't just fighting back. We were dismantling an empire brick by brick. It was enough to stall her promotion, maybe even end the career she had polished so carefully. My finger trembled as I hit send, and the screen confirmed delivery. A single click, but it felt like I had fired a bullet. My chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. It was done. I closed my eyes and pictured her, Olivia, sitting in her pristine glass-walled office, the city lights spilling around her. For years, she'd worn that flawless smile like armor. But now I imagined it faltering, her lips tightening as her boss summoned her in with a grave look. She'd lash out, her tone sharp, her composure unraveling in front of colleagues who once envied her poise. Her world was beginning to tilt, and I was the one pushing the balance. At home, I knew her mask would shatter entirely. She'd turn on Liam, her venom sharp as broken glass. "This is your fault, Liam. Your weakness is dragging us under." I could hear it as clearly as if I were in the room with them. Liam, pride wounded, would snap back, desperation bleeding through his voice. "Not me, Olivia. Someone's after us." They would circle each other like predators trapped in the same cage. A marriage built not on love, but ambition. And I held the hammer that was splitting it apart. Ellen met me in a quiet diner that smelled of grease and burnt coffee. The rain had left streaks across the window, distorting the neon sign outside. She slid a folded clipping across the table, her face drawn, her hands steady, but her eyes restless, darting to every shadow. "The letter hit," she whispered. "Her firm's investigating. She's standing on thin ice." I leaned back, the vinyl booth squeaking beneath me. The satisfaction was there, yes, but it was laced with unease. Olivia wasn't Liam. She wouldn't crumble the same way. She was colder, sharper, a snake when cornered. I remembered the first time we met all those years ago at Liam's engagement party. She had shaken my hand with a grip too firm, her smile gleaming but empty. Her eyes had cut right through me, sizing me up, dismissing me as irrelevant. A nobody. That memory burned like coals in my chest and fueled me now. "You're enjoying this," Ellen said, a half smile tugging at her lips, though worry lingered in her gaze. Maybe I admitted, my voice low. "But she's dangerous." I tapped my pocket where the deed, the trump card I hadn't yet played, rested in its drawer at home. I didn't need it yet. Not for her. Days later, I spotted Olivia from across the street. Her coat was buttoned tight, her face pale against the wind. Her stride, once so graceful, was quick and uneven. She was rattled, and I had done it. I stayed hidden in the crowd, my pulse quickening with every hurried step she took. That night, alone in my apartment, I read the headline again. "Marketing Executive Faces Budget Probe." The words glowed on the screen, and for a moment I allowed myself to savor it. My trophy. Proof that even the mighty could bleed. But Ellen's warning echoed in my ears. "She's dangerous when cornered." I thought of Liam's missed calls, his name flashing again and again on my phone. I had ignored them all. But what if they were talking now, Olivia and Liam, plotting together? I locked my door that night, the heavy bolt clicking into place, though it brought little comfort. The radiator hissed uselessly, the air heavy with winter's bite. I checked the news one last time, scrolling through lines that fed my triumph, until something caught me, something outside. I froze. A car idled beneath the window, no headlights, just a dark shape lurking at the curb, watching, my hands clenched into fists. My breath grew short. They were coming for me. When the car finally disappeared, the feeling remained clinging to me like damp clothes. February's chill gnawed at my bones as I made my way to the mailbox, every step echoing too loudly in the silence. My breath fogged the air. Inside the mailbox was a thick envelope, my name printed in stark black ink. My pulse thundered as I tore it open. The words blurred, then sharpened, cutting me to the core. A court summons. Liam and Olivia suing me. Defamation. They painted me as a bitter old man, vengeful, unhinged by rejection. My stomach twisted. They weren't just defending themselves. They wanted to bury me. I paced the apartment floorboards, creaking under my steps, the paper crumpled in my shaking fist. The radiator clanged, but the cold inside me only deepened. I could see him, Liam, in his tailored suit, leaning back in a leather chair, dictating calmly to his lawyer, that smug grin stretched across his face, and I knew this was only the beginning. Olivia would be sharper than ever, her voice low and venomous, urging their lawyer to destroy me. "He's nothing," she would sneer, just like that night. The memory cut deep, and for a moment fear spiked in my chest. But something stronger stirred within me, defiance. They weren't going to win. Not this time. Ellen met me at the library that evening, her coat dusted with rain, strands of hair clinging to her cheeks. She slid into the chair across from me, scanning the summons with a practiced eye. "They're desperate," she said finally, her tone calm, but her fingers drumming against the table's wood. "This is a bluff, David. They're scared, and they should be." She pushed her glasses up, her gaze locking onto mine with a fierce intensity. "We have the deed. That contract is ironclad. We'll hit back harder." Her confidence steadied me like a rope thrown to a drowning man. The noise of the library faded as I sank deeper into the chair. "But what if we lose?" My voice cracked, betraying the panic I'd tried so hard to bury. Ellen leaned closer, her hand brushing mine in a quiet promise of strength. "We won't lose. They underestimated you, and that will be their undoing." She wasn't just my lawyer anymore. She was my anchor, the voice pulling me back from the edge. We spread papers across the table, poring over every line, every loophole. The deed locked safely in my apartment drawer was our weapon, a single legal error that ensured the house remained mine. Ellen drafted our response, her pen scratching furiously against the page, like a soldier carving out a battle plan. "We'll file quietly," she murmured, eyes sharp. "Let them think they're winning." I nodded, the fear inside me slowly transforming into something heavier, steadier resolve. I wasn't their victim anymore, but the past still clawed at me. I remembered Liam at 16, caught lying about a stolen car. I messed up Dad, he had sobbed, tears streaking his cheeks. And I, foolishly believing love would fix him, had pulled him into my arms. I was wrong. That boy was long gone, replaced by a man who would spit in my face without remorse. The memory hardened me. Outside, the night air bit against my skin as I caught sight of Liam across the street, phone pressed to his ear, his posture stiff, his face pale. My pulse quickened, and I ducked into the shadows, breath shallow. He hadn't seen me, but his presence was enough. They were close. Too close. Back home, I locked every bolt, the summons lying on the table like a loaded gun. My fingers brushed over the drawer where the deed rested, my shield and my sword. I looked into the mirror, and for the first time in months, the man staring back wasn't broken. He was ready. The next morning, I slipped the envelope into my pocket. Its weight wasn't just paper, it was a promise. Today, everything would change. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone steps slick with March rain. My suit was worn and tight across the shoulders, but the deed gave me strength. My heart pounded, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Inside, the courtroom smelled of dust and polish. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators. At the plaintiff's table, Liam sat rigid, his suit crisp, jaw clenched. Olivia adjusted her scarf, her face a mask of perfect composure. But I saw the tension in her eyes, the way her fingers gripped her purse too tightly. They thought they had already won. Ellen touched my arm, her voice a whisper meant only for me. "You've got this, David." Her calmness grounded me, reminding me of the distance I had traveled, of the strength I had clawed back piece by piece. The judge entered, her gavel striking, her gray eyes sharp and unforgiving. The opposing lawyer rose first, his voice smooth and calculated, accusing me of lies, of spite, of being nothing more than a bitter old man. Liam nodded, glancing at me with a smirk, daring me to crumble. Olivia's lips curved in the faintest trace of triumph. But I didn't flinch. My hands were steady, my heart unyielding. Then it was our turn. Ellen stood, her presence commanding, her voice precise and sharp as steel. "Your Honor, we have evidence that changes everything." She turned to me, nodding once, and I knew it was time. I stood, legs planted firmly, my shoulders squared, and carefully handed the judge the deed. The paper felt impossibly heavy in my hands, the faded ink a testament to years gone by, yet every line remained legible, undeniable. "This is the original contract for the house," I said, my voice calm, but carrying the weight of everything I'd endured. "It was never properly transferred." The property is mine. The courtroom fell silent, every eye fixed on me. The hum of whispers died as the judge adjusted her glasses and began reading the document with meticulous care. Liam leaned forward, his face a mask of disbelief and simmering rage. "That's a lie," he bellowed, his voice cracking under the strain. "He's making it up." Olivia's hand shot to his arm nails, digging in for control, but her perfectly maintained composure shattered. Her eyes widened, betraying panic. The judge raised a hand, commanding the room into silence, and continued scanning the pages. I remembered the day I'd signed that deed. It was years ago, a gift of love, a promise of a future I imagined for Liam. I had trusted him, believed in him, loved him with every ounce of me. And now that same paper, the very symbol of my faith, was my weapon. My unexpected victory, twisting fate in my favor. "Mr. Clark," the judge said, finally looking up at Liam, "this document is valid. The transfer was never completed. The property remains the rightful owner's." A ripple of gas swept through the room. Liam sprang from his chair, the scrape of wood against tile sharp and frantic. "No, he can't do this." His voice tore through the air, a mix of fury and fear. Olivia's face drained of color, her carefully maintained poise crumbling as her purse slipped to the floor. She whispered something inaudible, a fragile plea lost in the chaos. Ellen leaned close to me, her breath warm, her eyes alight with pride. "You did it, David." I nodded, but my triumph was quiet, tempered by the heavy truth of what had unfolded. I had won, yes, but at a cost I could feel in my chest. Liam's unrestrained rage, Olivia's collapse, these were my doing. And yet as I watched them unravel, a strange relief coursed through me. The years of pain, the betrayal, the cruelty had all eased, replaced by a hard, steady sense of justice. The judge banged her gavel, silencing the room and dismissing their claims outright. I rose, my legs steady, and walked out into the crisp air, the taste of freedom sharp on my tongue. Ellen followed, a proud smile spreading across her face. I felt lighter, freer, but a lingering question hovered. What now? I touched the envelope in my pocket. Its work complete, yet it reminded me that the future was still unwritten. The courthouse steps felt solid beneath my feet. As I stepped out into the light, the world suddenly alive with possibility. A week later, the ruling came through. The house was officially mine, the deed upheld, undeniable. Liam and Olivia's empire, built on greed, manipulation, and betrayal, lay in ruins. Their wealth, their carefully curated status, their marriage all gone. And yet the victory wasn't just about the house. It was about me, reclaimed, restored, risen from the ashes of their cruelty. I lingered a moment longer, wondering what came next. I walked through the old house one last time, the floors creaking beneath my weight, the air thick with memories. Liam's boyish laughter echoed faintly from years past. Mary's voice called to me from the kitchen, warm and familiar. I ran my hand along the banister, worn smooth by countless touches, and felt a quiet reverence for the life that had once been, and the life I could still build. This house had once been the center of my life, every wall infused with memories, every floorboard echoing laughter and loss. Yet now it felt like chains around my chest, a reminder of years I could never reclaim. That morning I picked up the phone and called a realtor. Signing the papers to sell it, the pen felt impossibly light in my hand, as if the act itself could lift decades of weight. I didn't need these walls, these rooms haunted with the past. They were no longer mine. Ellen met me later at a small cafe, her scarf bright against the summer sunlight, a flash of warmth in the gray aftertaste of so many hard months. "You're free now," she said, spreading a worn map across the table, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of possibilities. "Paris or Rome?" she asked, laughing, her voice melodic, full of mischief and hope. I had never expected this. Our friendship, born from strategy and survival, had become a gift of life itself. She hadn't just saved me in court, she had rescued me from the dark, pulled me from the shadow of my own despair. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness, familiar yet softened by the promise of new beginnings. "Both," I said, grinning for the first time in years. Europe, the dream I had buried beneath 30 years of sacrifice and loss, was alive again, waiting for me. Memories of Mary came, her hand in mine, her voice tender and insistent. "Live, David. Don't stop." I had failed her once, pouring my soul into raising Liam, trusting that love alone could shape him. Now I was ready to honor her, to live fully for myself and for the dreams she had always believed I deserved. Her photo, now in a bright new frame, rested on the shelf in my small apartment, sunlight streaming across it like a benediction. A fresh start. The weeks after the trial had been remarkably quiet. News trickled in. Liam's firm collapsed under the weight of exposed deceit. His clients vanished like sand through fingers. Olivia's carefully curated career lay in ruins, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. I imagined them together, fighting and failing, their voices sharp, their so-called love shattered into pieces. I felt no joy, only a profound sense of closure. They had made their choices and I had made mine. Selling the house brought more than money, it brought freedom. Enough to fund my travels, to explore the world I had always imagined, yet never dared to see. The money was secondary. The liberation was everything. Ellen and I pored over guidebooks, laughing at our mangled attempts at French, imagining cafes tucked in cobblestone streets, piazzas alive with music. She would visit her daughter first, a bridge to rebuild, and I silently hoped for her happiness. She deserved it, every bit of it. My new apartment smelled of fresh paint, the morning sun spilling through wide windows, warming the small bright space. I wandered through it, light on my feet, finding Mary's photo, and pausing, the corners of my lips tugging into a quiet smile. I'm living now, I whispered, my throat tight with emotion. Justice had been bitter, but it had freed me. The man who once stood in the rain, broken and lost, was gone. In his place stood David Clark, whole, reclaimed, alive. Standing at my new doorstep, the plane ticket crisp in my hand, the promise vast and limitless, I felt the weight of decades lift. Paris first, then Rome, then anywhere my heart chose to go. The sun warmed my face, the future stretched out before me, wide and inviting, as if the world itself waited for my next step. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.